Welcome to Dwell at Home. We are so excited that you are joining us today, and happy Mother's Day to all of our moms out there. Before I do anything else, I just wanted to take a second to say that. But thank you so much for joining us online. I'm Pastor Natalie, and we are thrilled to have you here. If this is your first time with us, or if you're with us every single week, there is a digital connect card you can fill out. There's a QR code right here. We just want to make sure that you are able to stay connected to all the things going on at Dwell Church, and that even though we're here online, we can keep connected with you as well. So take 1 second and fill that out for me. But just a couple things we do have coming up soon. Here in a couple weeks at the end of May, we are going to be doing our child dedication. So at Dwell, we believe that baptism is a personal choice of an outward showing of your relationship with God and taking a new step with Him. But we don't want to miss all this time before someone is ready to make that decision. So we do what's called child dedications. And this is a statement of us, Dwell Church, saying that we are going to be with you to raise this child, because we all know it takes a village. But then you, as the parents, saying, I am committing to raise this child in the house of God. So if this is something you are interested in participating in, there is a QR code. You can get registered to join us that day. It'll be a quick in-person service where you can invite your friends and family, and we'll invite you up to the front with your child to say a prayer over them and kind of make this public declaration with us and the congregation as well. We would love to have you join us if this is not a step that your family has taken yet. And then one last thing that's coming up that we're very excited about, actually this Tuesday, we are having our team night at Dwell. It's going to be this Tuesday at the living room, and we would love to have you join us. Even if you have not served on team before, you are more than welcome to come join us. Just register here. We're going to have dinner. We're going to have childcare, so we want to make sure we are prepared for you, but we're excited to spend some time together and make this team feel more like a family. Go ahead and register, and we will see you Tuesday night. But before we move on, I always love to take a moment to say thank you so much to those who are giving faithfully to the kingdom of God. Your giving means so much and makes such an impact, not only in Dwell Church, but in the larger work that God is doing here. And I pray and I know that He is being faithful with you as well. As you show up in the Dwell world, we know that He is showing up for you too. So thank you again. If you would like to give today, you can do so online, and it does so much more than you know. But now we're going to move on. We have a great word this morning. I'm so excited to get into it. So grab your notebooks and let's check this out.
Hi, my name is what? My name is my name is my name is my name is what? Excuse me. My name is my name is.
Anyway, it's good to see you guys. Good to be here. And today we're going to talk about Jehovah Jireh. I'm not used to doing handheld mics, and the reason is because I have something called essential tremors, which is just fun because everybody thinks I'm nervous all the time. There are times I am nervous, and you can tell that if my legs are shaking. All right, if I look like I kind of need someone to help me, then I'm actually nervous. At this point, it's just a constant little fun thing. So if you see the mic kind of moving, I can tell you that essential tremors creates a situation where, like you would want me to help you with salt, right? Parmesan cheese, another one, really good at it. And my wife she likes sweetly. It's sort of a make fun, but still true. Babies love me because I kind of shake them like constantly, but not like, not like go to jail, but just kind of lull you to sleep like you're riding in a car with, treaded tires. You're like, oh yeah, that feels good. So that's good. But things you don't want me to do, and good thing I didn't go into these fields. You don't really want me to do surgery of any type. Right? I mean, you're like laughing awkwardly. No, seriously, I'd be like, I'm trying to get the spot. Maybe they're moving and it's not me. Anyway, we also, I should have ended with that one, but Angie doesn't let me paint. Like, she goes, we're going to paint this room. And I'm like, okay, you don't want me doing it? Because I can do like the roller thing. I kill that. It's the cutting in. Like when you have to be straight, if you don't want paint where you don't want it, don't have me do it. And so that's really the setup here. So anyway, that's just my warm-up, okay? Are you with me so far? Good. Pastor Eric told me to tell you to lean in. I don't, relax, all right? We're going to talk about Jehovah Jireh. We're going to, it's a challenging one for me. And it's because, the reason it's challenging is throughout my life in the church, I've mainly heard Jehovah Jireh presented as God will give you stuff. And it just doesn't match up with the Bible. And it creates problems. It can create problems if we push it too far in that range, because eventually someone's going to go, well, I needed something and God didn't give it to me. And now you're stuck with a conflict. Is what I was told wrong, or is God wrong? And I'm fascinated constantly by the fact that many people jump to, well, God was wrong, which is a super interesting problem. Rather than look to well, maybe I was told something wrong. They believe what they were told and stop believing in God, which is, or whatever, however all that works out. But it's just an interesting thing. So before we get going any further, what we're talking about is, I'm going to throw in a big word for you, transliteration, all right? What it is that when you have a language that sounds nothing like your language, you turn it into sounds that you do relate to, okay? Hebrew has sounds that we do relate to and we do get, but they're a little different. Not originally, but at one point, German theologians were translating things from Hebrew. And when Germans translated it, they transliterated it. They made it into sounds they thought they could do. They wrote it in letters. And what they ended up with was Jehovah. What the word actually is Yahweh. So when you hear Yahweh, you hear Jehovah, same thing, different transliteration. Aren't you glad you learned that giant word today? Next problem. Not really a problem. These aren't problems. They're just, for me, nerd stuff. Do you guys nerd about anything where you know more than a person probably needs to know about something? Are you thinking that about your husband or him with you? Okay, both of you. Okay, good. Awesome. Right? Some of you, I guarantee in Aeric and Natalie's church, someone in here knows all the different Star Wars lightsaber colors and why they have them, okay? No one needs to know that, but now you're hurt because I told you that. You're going to be okay. Just keep nerding out. Anyway, so to continue my kind of nerd, because I'm a Bible nerd, that Jireh is the same transliteration issue in that translated into more of American English, it's Yahweh Yireh. Does that add anything to your life? Not really. So you're welcome. It means the same thing. It comes down to what it kind of affects is God provider. And more literally, it's God will see to it. Which, again, for a Bible nerd is very, very interesting. The tense, where is it going to go? What's it going to do? All that to say, let's just jump in, because I find that trying to figure out what something means, what something was supposed to mean, it's best to just go to the place that it is in Scripture. Okay? So we're going to read a bunch. I'm basically going to give you a chapter. So we're going to take a big bite of the Bible today, okay? But I'm hoping it'll be good. So Genesis chapter 22. If you got a Bible on your phone, you got a paper Bible, whatever works for you, go ahead and open that up to Genesis 22. And it says this in verse 1. I'm going to read from the Message. It just kind of flows better for a story. After all this, God tested Abraham. And God said, Abraham. That's a great beginning. Abraham. What did Abraham say? Yes, answered Abraham. I'm listening. Most other versions, and again, this is a great version, but Abraham says, here I am. Multiple times. God says, Abraham. Abraham says, here I am. At another point, Abraham's son Isaac's going to go, Father, and he goes, here I am. And this is a great response. There's nothing deep about it. It's simply, what should you do if God speaks to you? Listen. Right? I mean, that's not complicated. We should listen. Here I am. Verse 2, he said, take your dear son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I'll point you to. Now that escalated quickly. Abraham, hey, what's up? Hey, you know your son? And in other versions, it's this. Because I feel like God's rubbing it in. He goes, so here's what I need you to do. I need you to take your son, your only son, the one you love, Isaac. It's like he needed to clarify. You've only got one son, but I'm gonna really kind of rub this in. I'm gonna push it all the way. And I think there's point in here that we're not gonna get until we get through this story, but he take your son. And what do I want you to do? I want you to take him and do something I've never told anyone else to do. Something that later on in the Bible, you're gonna go, God forbid. He says absolutely no human sacrifice. But for some reason at this point, God says, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to Moriah and sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on the mountain that I point you to. And the big one there is the one that I'll point you to. Verse 3, Abraham got up in the morning, saddled his donkey. And we'll make this clear later. But he took 2 of his young servants, his son Isaac. He had split wood for the burnt offering. He set out for the place God had directed him. And on the 3rd day, he looked up and saw the place in the distance. Abraham told his 2 young servants, stay here with the donkey. The boy and I are going over there to worship. Then we'll come back to you. I just want to point out that Abraham was told to go sacrifice his son, and his response, or what he is instructing his servants, he says, we're going to go worship, and then we're coming back. He did not say, I will come back. He said, we're coming back. What you should be thinking is, if you are first encountering this story, is he's going to be dead. How are we coming back? Okay? So, verse 6, Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering, gave it to Isaac, his son, to carry. He carried the flint and the knife, and the 2 of them went off together. Isaac said to his father, Father, yes, my son. What it literally says, here I am. It said, we have the flint, we have the wood, but where's the sheep for the burnt offering? And Abraham said, Son, God will see to it that there's a sheep for the burnt offering. Now, this is the first time that we encounter the word Jireh. Because what Abraham, in most of the translations, says it this way, is translated this way. God will provide himself an offering, which is super interesting for Christians, and we'll talk about that briefly later on. But he says, God will see to it is the closer to literal version. And there's a theological conversation about this, or there's limitless on this passage. But among them is this idea that if God sees it, then it's provided. That if God is there, bought in, seeing it, it's done. And so this is the connection to provision. That if God will see it, and this is also connected to the thing Pastor Natalie was talking about last week, when she was talking about that Ra, which is see. And Hagar says, she names a place. She says, I have seen the God who sees me. And the root of that word is interestingly the same one here. When we say God will see to it. When God will see to it, God will take care of it, is what is going on here. And so they kept walking on together. In verse 9, they arrived at the place where God had directed him. Abraham built an altar. He laid out the wood. He then tied up Isaac and laid him on the wood. Now, just for information, Isaac is not a toddler. Isaac is, we're guessing, let's go with 15 years old. Abraham's over 100. Isaac had to participate in his own being tied up. This is a crazy story. The questions are just limitless, guys. We're not going to cover them all. We're just going to focus on a tiny part. But it's just amazing. There's so much here. So anyway, Abraham tied up Isaac, laid him on the wood. Abraham reached out, took the knife to kill his son. This is nuts. Just then, an angel of God called out to him, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, right? Don't lay a hand on the boy. Don't touch him. Now I know how fearlessly you fear God. What a great translation of that. Just how fearlessly you fear God. You didn't hesitate to place your son, your dear son, on the altar for me. Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in the thicket. Abraham took the ram and sacrificed as a burnt offering instead of his son. Abraham then named that place. The message calls it God Jireh, or Yahweh Jireh, or Jehovah Jireh, all the same, okay? Which is God sees to it. That's where we get the saying, on the mountain of God, he sees to it, or he provides. The angel of God spoke from heaven a second time to Abraham. I swear, God's sure word, because you have gone through with this and have not refused to give me your son, your dear, dear son, I bless you. Oh, how I bless you. And I will make sure that your children flourish like stars in the sky, like sand on the beaches, and your descendants will defeat their enemies. All nations of the earth will find themselves blessed through your descendants because you obeyed me. What's the point of this story? It's those last four words. Because you obeyed me. That's the point. We do some odd stuff when we pull one verse or one piece of a verse out of the Bible and say, this is the thing that I'm going to claim. Without understanding, without holding on to or claiming the story actually means. This story is about the results of obedience. This story is unbelievably difficult to understand. It's horrific, and you should be glad that it's not you. But it's Abraham. And now he's called the father of faith. And we do some weird things with faith too, don't we? We make faith random belief, that if you just assent to it, you just agree, oh, I think that too. But faith really isn't that. It's much more challenging. It's much more, it is much closer to the word faithfulness, which involves obedience. So let's talk about Abraham really quick, okay? So what was unique about Abraham? What was unique about him is that he completely trusted God. To the degree that when God said something, Abraham accepted it as fact and when necessary, acted on it. Now, I've seen magnets or little quotes that said, God said it. I believe it. That settles it. I don't want that to be right, but it is. That's really frustrating for me because cliches, right? And some of them are so wrong, and I'm like, that one, I want to be against it. And I'm like, ugh, yeah, that one's kind of right. When God said something, Abraham accepted it as fact. How do we see this? Genesis 12. So we're going to jump. What we have in the book of Genesis, again, I'll nerd with you a little bit. Chapters 1 through 11 of Genesis. It begins with creation, right? And then people screw up. And everything just tanks. Just goes unbelievably bad from that point on. And then Genesis 12. God shows up and meets Abraham. And so this is where we're at. Genesis 12. It's this transition into what we see as God's plan coming and how he's going to get something done. And so in Genesis 12, God appears to Abraham and tells him, leave everything you have, everything you're at, everything around you, and go where I tell you. I'm going to make you a great nation, and I will bless everyone through you. To sum that up, God shows up to Abraham and says, go, be a blessing to people. Pretty simple. What does Abraham do? He got up and went. I'm currently 52 years old, which I know you're looking at me going, no way. You look way too young. Thank you. I appreciate that. I like that I have like two people laughing with me. It makes it more difficult. The humor, it's hard to get on a roll. But, we'll get there. I find myself funny, so I'm okay. But, so Abraham moved. He just got up and went. I'm 52, and I when I was younger, right, I signed up for the Army just because. Right? I went into the Army because I just wanted to fall out of airplanes. Well, they called it jumping. It turns out it's falling. You just fall out of them. You don't really, it's not, hey, it's more of a, because there's, anyway, that's kind of what happens. And it was just kind of a whim. We were engaged, we weren't engaged, we were close to, we were together. We met. My wife and I met in junior high, which was 1 or 2 years ago. Right? She was infatuated with me from the jump. From the beginning, she was like, there is a tiny 12-year-old boy who doesn't know he needs to shower yet, who sits in front of me, won't stop talking, turns around, steals my pencils and my jelly bracelets. Any 80s people? No? Okay. She wasn't. She thought I was annoying. I was terrible. But we went through like 3 years of English class where they would put you in alphabetical order and mix it all up. And for some reason, I was always in front of her. And so I would always turn around and, true? Yes. Yeah. I was just a blessing. Anyway, we started because of that, and I didn't know she was into me that much. She wasn't. But we started dating sophomore year of high school. We got married right out of high school. And so this was the whole plan, kind of together. And so my point is to tell you just how flippantly I decided. I was like, oh, I'll go in the Army. That'll pay for college, because I had to figure out that thing out. And so then I went and told her, which, if you're currently married, thinking about married, ever want to be married, what I would encourage is before you make major life decisions, maybe consider talking to the other person, all right? Before the decision is really key, okay? So you don't need to know all this, but my point is that life changes. We're talking about moving completely, changing everything in your life. When you're younger, it's so much easier. Just too dumb to know how much things can hurt. Right? And the people who are younger are like, I don't know what you're talking about. You will. I'm sorry, but you will. I'm not telling you life's the worst. I'm just telling you sometimes it is. That's my point. But Abraham, at this point in his life, is a grown man with a wife. They don't have kids, and that's kind of a theme to this thing. And God says, get up and go, leave everything. And he did. It implies that he got up the next morning and left. Guys, he didn't know where he was going. God said, I'll show you. That was great when I was younger, right? Hey, come hang out. Sweet. What are we doing? We'll figure it out. Awesome. Let's go do that. Now, you call me and say, hey, we're going to this thing. What's my first question? Angie, do you know my first question? When? Excellent. My next one, it might have even been the first one, is who's going to be there? Because I need someone who's safe, right? Basically, I need to create bubbles in my life that are super safe. I don't know when I became crazy, but I did at some point. And I wonder as I read these stories about Abraham, if God told me to go now, would I go? Because I look back at how easy it was to just go, and you could call it faith, or you could call it stupid. And as I analyze myself, if it was faith, I think it would still be there. And I wonder if I was just stupid. And I wonder how often faith and stupid go together. But we'll move on from that, not the message. So Abraham went. So that was chapter 12, Genesis chapter 15. God has promised that you're going to be the father of many nations. You're going to be, you're going to have kids. It's going to be incredible. You don't need to worry about anything. And Abraham doesn't have any kids yet. As this story goes on, it's easy to read these Genesis accounts and go, oh, that happened the next week or the next day. Abraham saw God like all these times. Guys, let me tell you, these are over decades. So there's God shows up, tells Abraham something, Abraham goes. There's some indication that God gives him and talks to him once he gets to a certain place. But after that, there's implied silence. And some of us think, oh, I just wish I could have God speak to me. Again, back to the crazy things. The ones that think God speaks to them constantly often aren't that good integrating with society. So you may just want to hear from him time to time. Just a thought. But at this point, Abraham confronts God, which is a weird thing because you haven't probably thought about confronting God much. Now, I'd caution you about being a little slow when you do it, but I think there are times. And the confrontation isn't so much often, God, you're doing this wrong, although there's places in the Bible that shows up, and it goes really well for Job. That's a joke too. But we can talk to God and say, God, I don't understand. And Abraham is having this kind of conversation, but he's direct. And he confronts God and says, hey, you said I'm going to be a great nation, but I don't have any kids. And God says essentially this. These are my summaries. God said, look, don't worry, you'll have a son. I guarantee it. And what does it say at this point? It says Abraham believed God. I love this because it doesn't say he believed that God. It doesn't say he believed in God. It just says he believed God. Back to if God said it, I believe it, that settles it. This is Abraham's mentality. Abraham starts off the conversation with God, what are you doing? Everything I have is supposed to be inherited by somebody, and all I have is this loser who's going to get it, who's not my son. God says, don't worry. I'm going to give you a son. I absolutely guarantee it. And Abraham goes, cool. And moved on. It's an interesting thing. Chapter 17. Abraham was 99 years old. Dude's old, right? I'm 52 and things hurt all the time at 99. If you're honest, you don't want to die, but at the same time, 99. Right? Maybe you've met people who are 99. My wife works in geriatric care. She's met 99-year-olds, and most of them are like, I'm good. She had one patient who she, how are you, Mary? I don't know the lady's name, which is good for HIPAA, I think. But how are you, Mary? She goes, I'm still here. I woke up. So he's 99, guys. And God shows up to him again and says, be faithful to me, and I'll give you a giant family. I'll make you into many nations. And at this point, Abraham, I've been calling him Abraham. His name's been Abram. And what that means in Hebrew is exalted father. And so God says, look, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change your entire identity. This is a good message, by the way. Just a little side note for you. I'm going to change your identity, your entire thing. And you know how I'm going to do it? I'm going to put an H in your name. Right in the middle. What's it take for God to change everything for you? Like an H. And so he changes his name from Abram to Abraham. And he changes from exalted father to father of many nations. This is an identity change. Abram was born as Abram, exalted father. He's an infant, exalted father. Look, what he was intended to be was the head of his clan. He was intended to be the head of his family. That was the entire plan. And God's plan is, how about we jump that up and move you from head of your clan to head of everything? I'm going to redefine this entire thing, and I'm going to do it by putting a in there. So it's pretty cool. And so he becomes from exalted father to father of many nations. And God also says this, because he gets more specific. The son I will give you will be through your wife, Sarah. That's pretty. That's awesome, isn't it? Sarah's 90. Look, again, 52. We have 3 boys. Our youngest is 24, 6. He's still young, but he's 26. Among the things I want least, like if I'm planning Greg's life, among the things, there are things that would change this. Among them are toddlers. I love my grandkids coming over. They're amazing. Do I want more of my own? No. These celebrities that are like 70 still having kids, I'm like, be done. Right? Something should happen that you can't do that anymore. But anyway, you're welcome, by the way. You guys invited me. Well, your pastor did. God says, I'm going to give you a son. It's going to be through Sarah. You're 99. She's 90. And there's another encounter that happens that Sarah actually laughs. Because the angels say to Abram, hey, a year from now, your wife Sarah is going to give birth. And Sarah hears this. She's kind of hiding, and she laughs. Which now is funny because you know what Isaac's name means, who is the son that was born? Laughter. God's got a great sense of humor. Basically, you laughed, so I'm going to name your kid Laughter. Enjoy that. You'll remember it forever. So he changed his name, chapter 21. I promise you this all has a point. I hope you're seeing the theme. God promises, Abraham believes. God promises, Abraham believes. God promises a son specifically through Sarah and Abraham. Not surrogacy, not adoption, but through these two. Genesis 21, Abraham and Sarah have a baby, and they name him Isaac. So finally, at this point, all these years, Abraham can physically see that God's promise is possible. Right? His promise is father of many nations. And now he finally has a son. A son that fits the promise. That's a whole other conversation about Ishmael. But he finally can see that God's promise is possible. Physically see it. He's never doubted it. It's kind of crazy. Finally, Abraham can be calm, knowing his future is secure. Genesis 22. Here we are. The chapter we just read. God tells Abraham then to sacrifice Isaac. So what does Abraham do? It says this. Abraham got up early the next morning and saddled a donkey. What are we talking about here? Abraham has a promise from God. After all these decades, God delivers on his promise. And just a few years later, God says, hey, go kill your promise. Our version of Christianity, our denominator, our style, puts a lot of things on God's promises, and you can trust him and things like that. And there's a lot of emphasis on just getting a hold of the words God has given you and things like that. And I'm cool with that to a degree. But when it overshadows obedience, we lose the Bible. We lose actual relationship, the intended relationship between ourselves and Yahweh. So faith isn't simple belief, guys. It's trust. In fact, it's trust so profound that it changes how you act. The story we've just talked about is fundamentally about God asking Abraham which was more important. Listen to me. God was asking Abraham which was more important, the promise or the giver of the promise. So, as proof, God told Abraham to put the promise to death. And in response, Abraham's response was, early the next morning, he got up and saddled a donkey. Why is Abraham called the father of faith? It's this. So Jireh, how does provision and provider and Jireh, whatever you want to call it, come into play? On the way, Isaac, which I think it would be fun to call him the promise. On the way to where God has called him, the promise asked Abraham, hey, where's the thing we're going to use to worship with? And Abraham's response is great, and he says, God will see to it. Jireh. God will take care of it. It's Jireh. Don't worry, God will provide what is needed. And literally, Abraham says, God will provide to himself a lamb for the offering. So they go up the mountain, they build an altar, and Abram raises his knife to kill his promise. What a way to think about it. He raises his knife to kill his promise. Isaac, his son, his only son, whom he loves. You remember that from the beginning? Take your son, your only son, the one you love, Isaac. And at this point, he's got a knife over him. He's going to cut his throat, it seems, depending on how you want to picture it. And what happens is God stops him. And once again, a voice calls out, Abraham, Abraham. And Abraham's response is, do you remember? Here I am, ready to obey. And God stops him from killing Isaac. And he says, it's okay, Abraham. Now I know you hold nothing back. Abraham then sees a ram provided by God that he then sacrifices. And Abraham calls the place Jehovah Jireh. That's where Jireh comes from. That's its context. He calls it Yahweh Jireh because of the mountain, and then it's explained, and it became known as that, and because on the mountain of the Lord, God will see to the need. The messages I've heard about Jehovah Jireh are usually that God provides for all your needs. And it's often combined with something like Philippians 4:19. And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of glory in Christ Jesus. The take then is often that you don't need to worry because God will provide everything for you if you have enough faith. In this, though, faith seems more like magic, that you either are a faith wizard or you aren't. Which years ago I began to see and went, we're missing something in faith. What is it? And see, let me use this as an instruction. When you hit something that doesn't make sense, especially when you've heard something and now you've got the Bible and you go, if possible, put forth effort to try and figure out that discrepancy, to try and understand. And it doesn't mean that everybody's always going to have to agree with you or you're going to have to agree with them. You're going to find ways through this thing. But the better than to just simply go with the flow, I want to encourage you to study and learn and try to become better at this Bible. It's not easy, but it's good. But it's good. And it's worth it. But the story of Abraham, guys, isn't about insane belief in the unbelievable. It's about God, about what God told Abraham to do. It's about knowing God to the degree that when he says he will do something, you believe it. And when God told Abraham to do something, Abraham believed it. He believed it so much that he acted on it. He believed it so much that the only reasonable thing for him to do is act on it. I used to do a message with teenagers in which I'm trying to explain faith, and up on the podium I would light firecrackers. And inside a building, firecrackers are really loud, right? It's great. It really is. It's fun watching people be startled when you're not. I don't like being startled personally, but making other people that way is just a nice little joy, a nice little thing in life. Anyway, and I probably like 5 different firecrackers, and at some point there's a little like tension, right, with it. And so in the end, I pick up an M80, and I kind of make it clear what I have, and I light it, and I throw it into the audience. What do you think happens? They scatter. It's fantastic. What they don't know is I opened it up and pulled all the powder out beforehand so it doesn't do any damage. I'm not trying to kill people, guys. That was my army time. This is this time. So I find that funny. But anyway, here's my point. I created conditions for belief by lighting firecrackers, and I threw it in there, and they responded to something they believed. Faith is pointless if there's no response. It doesn't make sense. So what you believe? You verbally assent to Jesus? Great. Right? You intellectually agree? Well, I think it's conceivable that there's a God. That's fascinating. You're kind of boring. A guy named James in the New Testament writes that, so you believe in God? So what? Even the demons believe in God, and they shudder. In this case, the demons have faith because they know they're wrong. You with me? He believed so much that he acted on it. Jireh for Abraham and us then is this. Abraham knew that if God sent him, God would provide the need. And the tense here is important. It's the future tense. God will. When I obey, God will. We like to accept God as provider when he has provided. Requires no faith. Requires no trust. It's already there. There's nothing wrong with that. That's amazing. You know how much safer I feel when I already have things, right? We both have steady jobs right now, and I hear the offering message. I think she's back with kids. I get that, right? 30-some years of ministry, you don't have a great retirement account. You have to just kind of, it's mostly, there's still part of me that's like, yeah, let's fall out of airplanes. My wife isn't that. She got signed up because I signed up. She's kind of getting dragged through this whole thing. I'm like, no joke. When we were like, yeah, you're going to get married. You thought I was going to be a lawyer. I'd have been a good lawyer, guys, and a bad human. But I've been a good lawyer, and I would have made money. And my wife, when we married, she thought, oh, I'm getting out of the crud I'm in, and we're gonna be able to survive and make it. And then we got married and everything else, and she's like, you're gonna become a lawyer. I'm like, well, I was thinking about philosophy. How about that? And after that, maybe I could study the Bible. Will that work? And she begrudgingly, yes. It hasn't been that way. And so now, whatever age, it's really kind of nice. We don't have to worry if suddenly we lost our job. And I'm not trying to give you too much information. I'm trying to help you understand faith and the tense here. That right now, for my mortgage, God has provided, and it's wonderful. It's so much emotionally less tense than when it was God will. But here's the thing, is I'm currently wondering, do I have any more God will? Because I want to go where God is telling me to go, and I want to do what God is telling me to do. And while I love being able to provide for myself, I think the real stuff is where God provides for me. Jehovah Jireh, yeah. So we struggle as provider in the situation where he will provide. The test exists in whether obedience occurs before he has provided. We know when he has, but will I act on when he will? Jehovah Jireh, Yahweh Yireh, on the mountain of the Lord, here's the understanding, is when I go where God tells me to go and do what God tells me to do, I know God will see. And if God sees, God will see to it. God will take care of it. God will provide. The story is an interesting parallel, somewhere around 1,800 years later. When another father has his son, his only son, the son whom he loves, and he tells that son, get on the altar. Go to the tree. They're going to put you on another high place. It's going to be called Golgotha. They're going to nail you to a tree, and you are going to be sacrificed. You think it helps when you're the sacrifice to know it's going to save the planet? I don't know about you, but I'd be thinking, I don't know that the planet's worth it. Have you seen these people? And yet, Jesus, the Son of God, sacrificed for us. We sit here today, able to hear his word, able to be encouraged, able to be built up, a part of a community. Because that many years ago, another man and another father said yes. It's a weird play on faith, isn't it? When you realize that God, apart from you, believes in you. And what is our response? Let me dare you to find places that you can, early the next morning, get up and go. God bless.